All right. That took a little second to go live, but today we, on the podcast, the T Podcast, we have a great episode. We're going to be talking with a former resident of Lafayette, Evante Daniels. He is a author, creative, and founder of Free Your Feed, and like I said, author of a book that he just released called Power, Beats, and Rhymes. So sit back, enjoy the show. It's going to be an interesting conversation, so you're not going to want to miss it. All right, so before we get the conversation started, go ahead and tell you about our presenting sponsor, that is Chase Group Construction. They take the lead and become your one point of contact for the entire design build process. So if you're looking to build something, a new business from the ground up, they can help you design and build it. If you're looking to renovate a space, same thing. They can help you design and build that as well. They're all inclusive. They're an architect and contractor all in one. That's how that works. Diverse portfolio of projects that range from medical centers to popular restaurants and multi-unit shopping centers. They build a lot of stuff. So you've seen their work. I know you have. If you've eaten at Fat Pat's in Broussard or Bro Bridge, you've seen that's some of their work there. So check them out, chasegroupconstruction.com. Great local company, and they support us. So you should consider supporting them. So yeah. And now let's get the conversation started. And today, like I said, we have Evante Daniels. Welcome to the T Podcast.
Thank you for having me on. So excited to be here.
Yeah, so you're not a stranger of the podcast. I've had you on several years ago. We were in a completely different spot. We've moved like at least a couple, maybe 3 times, I think, since then.
Wow,
yeah.
Okay.
We were in an undisclosed location for a moment of time that I'm not allowed to mention, but we had to make several moves. So,
Okay.
And now we have an official spot that we lease. It's a little small, little cube.
I love it. It's fantastic. I love seeing how this podcast has grown over the years, from where you started this of like iPad on a tripod to now like we're in a studio with the lighting, the mics. It's so exciting to continue to see this grow.
I appreciate that. Yeah, man. And it's exciting to see you grow as well. It's been interesting to follow your social media posts and to see what you're doing and to know that you got a book out. Like, I don't know what you would call grown-up status, but if I had to put a label on it, I think coming out with a book is grown-up status. Like,
well, I can assure you, I don't feel any more grown up than I did from before, other than now people expect me to have smart things to say.
Gosh. Right. You should be an intellectual at this point. Okay. So, so the last time we spoke, you had just moved to the Bay Area of San Francisco for work.
Yes.
And from what I've gathered, that job that you were going for is no longer. You have changed your career paths at least a little bit.
Yeah. So careers continued to grow. During COVID, I had to make a pivot. I was in nonprofit, and our nonprofit organization closed. And like a lot of people, was trying to find a job, and I found a job as a social media manager, which was a step back because I had been a marketing director and a program director before. But when you're looking for a job, you take what you can get.
Yeah, right.
And so over the next 2.5 years with that company, I was able to kind of slowly get my feet wet into tech, which was a new sector. At the same time, generative AI was becoming a big thing. We were diving into stuff like learning models and NLP. And so I had a lot of learning to do to catch up. But then once I did, it was on and popping. So very quickly went from running their social media to managing marketing and promotions for the entire app and focus on growth and user acquisition. So pretty much downloads and installs. But doing it from a cultural understanding place, which was really cool to do. From there, I went to work in agency as a strategist, which is pretty much just saying, I just want to be a thinker for a living.
Right.
And, someone says, here's a problem. How do you solve it? The strategist is the guy who writes the paper that says, here's how you solve the problem. And so I got to do that for a white glove agency, which allowed me to work with some amazing brands. I got to work with Adidas.
When you say white glove meaning
just a boutique agency that really started at I could never afford our services. I was so far removed from the people that we were trying to sell to. It was almost comical.
Okay.
But we worked with senior executives. We worked with top companies, top Fortune 100 companies. A couple of our clients were like Adidas, Apple, Jordan, groups like this that we were doing.
Oh, that type of white glove.
Yeah. So we were up there, and it was amazing because, I went from, in essentially 4 years, from community nonprofit work, where my budget was less than $50,000, for a year, which in marketing terms is not a lot of money.
Right now.
To a tech company that had a limitless budget, where we spent over $1 million on TikTok a month, to then an agency where you had to find that sweet spot.
Hold up, you said $1 million on TikTok?
A month.
Lord. It took a second for that to sink in. I was like, hey, $1 million?
I mean, it didn't last for long at $1 million, but we had the ability.
A big push.
It was a big push, but we had the ability to make those calls and those choices. And what it really did was put me in a spot where it was like, how good are you? Because you can't blame the budget. You can't blame all of the resources because they'll give you whatever you need. It's literally just you and your brain and thinking it through. And so for the last almost 4 years now, my focus has been in what we call content strategy and understanding how everything, including this podcast and the live streams, is a form of content.
Yeah.
And that content exists everywhere, right? When we're scrolling social media, when we're reading the newspaper, when we're looking at a menu.
We're consumed with consuming content.
Content is everything these days. And really saying, what does that mean? Like, what's the actual implications of that? And how can we understand how to use content, right, to further goals, but also to support our community, which is really what led to the inspiration behind the book. So for the last few years, it's been a journey. It's been an absolutely fun journey. I've gotten to work with some of my heroes. I've gotten to, I'm a sneakerhead. Going to Adidas was crazy. Going to Jordan was insane. But also at the same time made me yearn for community and community organizations and getting back on the front lines of a lot of the issues that I loved to be in the fight for in Lafayette.
Okay. So are you still in the Bay Area? So I'm guessing you're still there.
Yeah, I'm still in San Francisco.
Okay.
Actually live in a little neighborhood called Hayes Valley, which is right where the heart of Midtown is, which is really cool to see. It's actually the former remnants of part of a historical Black neighborhood that's now just moved 2 blocks up, which is the Fillmore District, which if you're familiar with San Francisco, that's where all the Black musicians lived. That's where really West Coast jazz has really got its kind of heart outside of Berkeley, is over in that part of San Francisco. So I'm getting to kind of still live in some history and some culture just like I did when I was here. Nice.
I like that. So I don't want to dive too deep into your move there, and because you post everything on social media, and because you're a very content driven person, you were dating somebody. Are you still are? It's hard to tell.
I'm in and out of relationships. Dating is hard. If you're dating right now, it's the trenches. I'm still in that journey.
Okay.
But that's life, right? That you figuring out, and honestly, I just spent some years just focused on my career and focused on personal development. So relationships kind of taking a back seat.
Yeah, I get that, man. I get that. So are you thoroughly enjoying the West Coast life?
I am. I think, I'm not as swept away in love with it as I first was, because that's the first 9 months.
That was the lure of it.
Right. Yeah. You're like, wow, there's no mosquitoes, there's no humidity.
Oh God, I would love that.
Right. There's always a constant breeze. The hottest it gets is 70 degrees. Sounds fantastic.
That does.
And I've also learned more about the problems there. All right. So every community has struggles. Every community has an underside to it. And you have the side that is marketed, that gets talked about a lot, like the tech industry in the Bay Area.
It looks fancy.
It looks awesome. Yeah. And so, you all, no matter where we are, we buy into that at first, and we have to. That's what we know. But as we learn more, we get to really fall in love with the actual place. And so in San Francisco, that comes down to issues like homelessness, like substance abuse.
And it's pretty bad. I mean, obviously compared to the size of Lafayette, San Francisco is huge.
Yeah.
So your problems are always multiplied.
Yeah. Yeah, and just the same way we have struggles with local government and enacting change that's actually broad enough to fix a systemic issue, we deal with the same struggles, right? Nothing changes on a government level regardless of the size of the city. You still have the same regulation problems and bureaucracy and red tape. But culturally, right, you get to see it in a very different way. I mean, it's much more accessible in San Francisco and in the Bay Area in general. And
When you say accessible, are you talking about the government or just in general
the
life there?
The life.
Okay.
Right. So whatever you want to do is open, and like that's cool to an extent. But at the same time, it puts the government in a weird spot where they can't necessarily make the moves they want to make. The community doesn't always get the support they need to get. And so we find ourselves very similar to the situations that a lot of concerned citizens feel, even in towns like Lafayette, where you're like, my voice isn't being heard, you know? And sometimes they'll paint a city, San Francisco, the Bay Area, LA, New York, as this more magical spot.
Right. Yeah, like the Disney World or Disneyland.
Right. Like
of
it's got its problems figured out, and they've handled it, or they understand what they're doing at a better level than you do. And in reality, it's not really the case. There's more responsibility, there's more money, there are more numbers, but the choices are really coming down to the same stuff. And I think that was kind of an interesting thing to realize after being civically involved in Lafayette, to then go to San Francisco and be like, oh, I'm not relearning. This is exactly what I was dealing with in the South, you know? So it's been a journey, though. It's been good.
Yeah. I know one of the things we talked about last time you were here, and it seemed like it was specific to Lafayette, because you had gotten, I think it was where the conversation was, you gotten pulled over at one point and you felt as if this cop was discriminating, and for all means he probably was. Do you feel that there is and I think I know your answer, but because I've never been to California. Sure. I really have never even stepped foot on the West Coast. The farthest I've been, as far as West Coast goes, would be Nevada, Las Vegas. And that is like Disney World of the West. So it's like, to saying that I understood what it was like is false, because the Strip is totally different. But is there similar issues on those lines of racism and discrimination in cities like that, that's, like we just said, seem to have it figured out and seem to be more of a magical type of place?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we got to look at any city and understand that when you have people groups, right, that are coming together for the first time, and that's kind of the unique thing when you think about a city like San Francisco. We've got people coming from China, people coming from Taiwan, from Vietnam. You also have people coming from Chicago, from New York, from Germany, and they're all coming to this area around the Bay, around the San Francisco Bay. If we just look at the Bay Area entirely, of like 12.7 million people. And we're all smushed together.
Yeah,
right?
Little bitty.
So like, sometimes when people go, oh my gosh, that's so diverse, that must be a utopia. And you're like, well, not necessarily, because what if you don't like the way that Eastern Europeans cook fish and they live next door to you, right? So like you get to learn so much about the places and the people, but you still have those frictional points. You know, I always say that like concepts of prejudice, right? And that all comes from a survival tactic. And so it's natural. When you meet something that you've never seen before and you don't know what it is, whether it's person,
foreign.
It's foreign. So you're like, oh, I don't know how to handle this. And so you kind of retreat a little bit, right? Well, if everything is kind of new and everything's a little different, right? Then you're always kind of trying to retreat or figure these things out. Very similar to when we're dealing about discrimination in a situation like Lafayette. Even if we're dealing with fewer people groups, for example, right? Diversity is still there, beliefs are still there, and different groups believe different things, they move different ways. And while we're all people, we all have a lot of commonality, there are some really small differences. And so in San Francisco, like it's 0.4% black.
0.4?
0.4.
Wow.
In San Francisco.
So tiny.
It's so small. So like it's inclusive, but I also feel alienated because I don't see black people in San Francisco. If I want to see black people, I go to Oakland. And now Oakland is like 45% black as compared to how it used to be, which was in the upper 60s and 70s. People are moving. Culture and neighborhoods change, right? And so with that, the new people who are in there weren't experiencing it like the people who were there before. They don't know how to feel about culture. There's a joke in San Francisco. I heard a comedian say that he was in line somewhere and these guys were complaining about barbecue. And they were like, you know, we have a couple of barbecue restaurants in San Francisco, but where is the good barbecue? And he's like, well, you pushed out everybody who made barbecue.
Yeah, all the good barbecue is gone.
You know, so like we have the same challenges of any place, right? That when you are bringing people together, there's going to be friction. That's how we get to a place of inclusivity, of a place of welcoming, is we have to understand that as many commonalities, there are some differences. And that learning has been an adjustment, because I'm learning more about Russian culture. I'm learning more about Chinese culture. I worked for someone who was born in Beijing and had just recently moved to the United States.
So you're having to learn how to be around people that you've never really been around a whole lot.
Absolutely.
So,
so it's a learning side on both of us. It's very humbling.
I bet.
Yeah, because you're like, wow, I didn't realize that was a stereotype. And they're like, it is. And you go, okay, so like, tell me about you. Help me understand you for real.
Yeah, and stereotypes are funny because you hate to believe it because you're like, oh no, that's not real. But there's truths in it. Now, some of it's exaggerated.
And then figuring out where they're coming from.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
so it's been cool though. It's been cool.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, man. I mean, I say amazing in a learning experience kind of way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like that's really in a lot of different ways. I've continued to just be in a place of studying and learning since moving out to the Bay, which, I was doing that while I was here in Louisiana. So it's just that permanent kind of.
Yeah, because you're originally from Atlanta area.
I'm from Atlanta. Yeah, I was born and raised in Atlanta. I came down here.
In Atlanta, I mean, you want to talk about good black community, that's
pretty much the epitome. I always say that, like, out of all of the cities that are majority black, Atlanta's the best one.
Oh, yeah.
And I say that louder every year. But yeah, like it's been a shift every time. And I love that. I love the cultural shift that I had to go through, going from a black excellence town like Atlanta to coming to Lafayette, Louisiana, in heart of Cajun country, to then going to the Bay Area, which is predominantly Asian and white.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's continually put me in a place to go, you are a person, right? And you are navigating this world like everybody else.
Right.
Sit down, shut up and listen.
Yeah.
And just have these conversations,
Dude, it's amazing. So you mentioned something. Well, we got a couple of comments coming through real quick. Jonathan Williams says Las Vegas is more west than Los Angeles, but I get it. Okay, I guess I get that. Wait, is it more than? Okay.
You have to Google Map that.
Yeah, I'm going to look at. If you're talking geographically, I'm going to have to look because I don't think so, but. Maybe culturally you might be talking about, but we'll see. John Malonzo, oh, hey, I know these guys. Mark, Mark, I've never said your name out loud. Tassan. Hey, peeps. All right, so you mentioned about the percentage of black residents in certain areas of, I guess you mentioned San Francisco area. So was it San Francisco or?
Yeah. Okay. So really looking
60 to 40.
So looking at San Francisco is 0.4.
Yeah.
Looking at Oakland has gone from around 60 to 40%.
And Oakland is
10
about
minutes away.
Wow.
So like the San Francisco's tiny.
Yeah.
It's not a big city. We're talking about 7 miles by 7 miles. That's all San Francisco is.
I think that's smaller than Lafayette.
Smaller
right?
than Lafayette.
God.
However, San Francisco by itself has more population than the state of Louisiana.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay. The peninsula has more than Louisiana. I think when we look at San Francisco, it's right under a mil so not as much as Louisiana, but it's pretty dense.
Jeez.
But you consider Oakland. So I always tell people, like, you hear people talk about San Francisco. If you really want to make an accurate comparison, it's the Bay Area because it's all urban sprawl connected.
Okay.
Right. So from like San Francisco down to every, Mountain View, Palo Alto, all the places that you hear about for the tech companies. They're not really separate towns. They're like boroughs, if you could imagine, right?
Yeah.
All the way down to San Jose, all the way around the Bay, going up through Oakland, Berkeley. It's all connected together. And so it really is a whole like metropolitan area, really a city.
Yeah.
But then San Francisco is a really small part of that.
So, I mean, it'd be similar to if you want to really kind of bring it home. It's like Lafayette and Karen Crow would be, very similar. They're not that far away, but I mean, there is still some disconnect with.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I get what you're saying.
Yep.
So, what do you believe is the cause of the percentage of the black population reducing? Is it the fact that property is getting more expensive? Is that the socioeconomical side of it? Or is there just a shift because there's too many white people moving in? I don't know.
So, when we talk about displacement in general, it's a lot of factors.
Obviously.
Right? And so when we talk about over decades of black people moving out of neighborhoods, it's due to a couple of things. It's due to the cultural changes in the Bay Area. right? San Francisco was a really, as a core, is an artistic city.
Yeah.
Right? The tech boom was an additional thing added on from the 80s going forward. But when we look at where San Francisco really got its heart, it was very much in arts and culture. So you still have that base. And there were a lot of Black creators, Black artists who came up through that. As the city's changed, as things do, right, there have been some cultural values that have changed. There have been people who have come in and who have moved there, like Zuckerberg, for example. Not to say he's a bad guy in this context,
right?
But like in moving out there and bringing 2,000 employees who are tech focused or tech minded or are coming from a STEM background, then you're ending up bringing people who may not have had. You don't bring in the people who may not have had access to that background.
Yeah, they're not super culturally advanced. They're technologically advanced,
right?
But you see those people, they're separated from art. Artists are very unique, and culturally speaking, artists have to be, I'm trying to say this easily. It's been known that artists are very free and just kind of don't want to mess with technology and just kind of want to be themselves. And then lately, obviously with the technology boom that you mentioned, I don't know.
It's been a change, and because of that, that leads to changes in property values. That leads us to changes in policy and regulation, right? Because now the majority of the money in San Francisco comes from tech. If you think about every device that you have in front of you has an office in San Francisco.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
If it's not, they're headquartered in the Bay Area. They have an office there, right? And in this tiny little area, these guys are coming up with the user experience, the reason that your keyboard looks the way it does, or the reason it has a backlight. And so the impact is huge. And so I always say that San Francisco is like two cities on top of each other. You have the tech city where people are making $300,000, $400,000 like out the gate. And then you have the other side of the city that is the poverty line's at $90,000. And I have friends making $30,000.
That's wild.
And that's because of this disparity where we don't have that same access. You have people who were not in these STEM areas who were not given access to stuff because it just wasn't accessible. And for some people it was. That's life. And unfortunately, when it smushes together like this, we get this really, really large sense of disequity.
It makes sense. It's just weird to think about. Like, the poverty line is 90,000 and people are making 30.
Yeah.
Jeez. Just to think about the difference of economics locally here in Lafayette compared to that's just wild, because 90,000 for someone is really good here.
Yeah. It's phenomenal. And now, like, when I hear people say, like, oh, man, I just made $100K, I'm like, damn.
Really?
I really hope he can pay, dude. Like, I hope he can pay rent. Like, he probably got a studio.
God, not even a bedroom. Right. Just one door that's into the unit. That's it. Maybe a closet. God, that's scary to think about. So, kind of on brand with this topic, but kind of a tangent, is on TikTok. I love the channels that go around asking people, kind of like the man on the street kind of positions, where they ask, wage transparency. Mm-hmm. They'll ask people of all different cultural backgrounds, mm-hmm. and you have your tech people, you have your artists, you have your teachers, and a lot of them are these really young guys, like in their early 20s, women and guys, just in the tech world making easy $200,000. And I'm like, but I think about where's this video taking place, and usually it's California, in the Bay Area, or in that
or
range,
in New York or something.
Yeah. And I'm like, dude,
people so in 2006 there was a British mathematician, I can't remember his name, but he had this quote where he says that data is the new oil. Data is the new oil. And he said that in 2006.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, now we are nearly 2 decades past when he said that. And now, after now working in mobile apps and getting to see the amount of data that I have access to, and like that collectively tech gets through, you then understand why they get paid that much. It's not the app. Right? It's not the experience that we're all dealing with, right? It's not the scrolling experience that's that valuable. It's the understanding that comes from that. And I think a lot of people, actually, I know a lot of people don't understand that about social media. They don't understand that about all of the platforms that we use these days, right? Whether it's Netflix, your Apple or Google News, Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, Amazon, Target shopping, your grocery pickup, your social media.
All of it
works the same way, right? And it all runs on an economy of data. It all runs on an economy, on an infrastructure, if we wanted to use that kind of terminology from an economic development point, right? This underground system of data being captured, understood, and sold, and then bought, and then used. And like for the rest of us, that's not what we're thinking about every day. No one's thinking about ones and zeros.
Yeah.
But the implications of it are huge. And the impact is huge. I'll tell you a story. So when I was working at this startup, and we did market penetration. And market penetration is all about launching a brand or a product into a market where it hasn't existed before and it's not known about. And so you have to think about that for a second. We're an app, right? And we were a job board. So we're like Indeed or like LinkedIn. Right. And essentially the question that was put on my desk as the marketing guy was, how can you introduce an app and get people to trust that app so that they will give up their personal and private information? Because like, let's be real, right? Think about a resume for a second. What's on a resume? You got your name, you got your phone number, you got your email, and some guys still put their mailing address on it, right? So like this is prime information. You have on top of that your career, your work experience, references, contact information, right? All this kind of stuff. It's
good
actually,
data.
It's a lot, right?
Yeah.
And for some people, they really do think about, I'm not just giving you my resume. I want to know who you are first. And when you're going to a new town, how in the world are you supposed to get people to just trust you like that? And it comes down to saying we need data.
Yeah.
Right. So we did this, and we did this in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Okay.
And I spent 2 months doing research. And what I did is I went into the towns and I went with some coworkers.
Wait, so you boots on the ground?
Boots on the ground in Knoxville. And we talked to people and we said, you know, where do you shop? What do you do? And so we're doing the things, we're getting little data points, right? And we're figuring out, oh, this is the singular target everybody goes to. Oh, everybody drives on this street. Ooh, Johnston Street is really busy during this time of day, right? And that's all happening through conversation, which then got us started. But then when we got the app on the ground, we put it in places that made people feel like it was trust. We had commercials running, right? We made sure commercials ran around sports because Knoxville's the heart of the SEC. So we're like, dude, this is how we're going to do this. And of course, it worked. Within like a month, we had 10,000 downloads because people saw this video that was done in such a way that when it popped up on their screen, they didn't go, oh, I wonder who those guys are. They said, those guys are trustworthy. Let me download this app. And like, that is a very different way to look at an app.
Yeah.
That's a very different way to look at data. To say that every screen, right? Every time when we had someone sign up and they had to put in their name, then the next page, they put in their education information. The next page, they put in this information, then that information. We could see the amount of people who went to each of those pages. We could see how many
where they fell off.
Yeah. We could see exactly the information they were putting in. And then we were able to make actual inductions about that and say, oh, wow, when we get to the education page, people keep dropping off. I wonder if we need to be focused more on blue collar instead of higher education. And we did, right? The daily experience that we have as everyday humans through our devices and our screens, which is the way that we communicate, it's the way that we exchange goods and services, it's the ways that we express ourselves, it's the way that we keep track of our history, is all I wouldn't say a facade, but it's a curtain. And behind it is a lot of behavioral analytics and a lot of stuff like that is super, super valuable, right? And so as a strategist who relies on that data, right? Because I still use those tools. I still do that kind of research. A lot of times I have to remind people, like, the reason these guys get paid so much on social media is because they're not building an app. They're building a trap. Right? Like these apps are designed.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, they're designed. You're right. They have to be designed. And the goal is engagement. I'm on TikTok all the time. I'm on TikTok at least 2 hours in the evening.
Stuck. Yes.
You get stuck, right? The
it was designed that way.
The notifications, all of these things are not accidents, right? I've written notifications. And I don't even say some of them were very good, but like someone has to sit at a computer and type out, oh, we need to remind people to come and check our app because they may forget it exists. So every couple of days, if they're not active, we're going to have this notification pop up. And that's how notifications work. Right? Like that's the system that we're in. So there's a person behind every single one of these decisions. When you're like, why did the home button move on my Facebook app?
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody moved it and they're testing it out and they're getting data and they're deciding if that's a good move or not. And if it's not, they move it back or they test it on a small section.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And it's crazy, not to cut you off.
No.
It's crazy because you mentioned that just this past week. And I've noticed it multiple times over the past few years. Facebook's or any social media, and especially Instagram, made that blunder of putting the shop icon at the middle bottom of the app.
Yeah.
And then people had like bounced off of Instagram. They were tired of it. They didn't want to feel like they were being sold to. And then Instagram decided to put the little add a post back to the middle button. But Facebook, yeah, I've noticed on the bottom, every once in a while I'll have like 5 icons. And then the next day I'll have 3. Mm-hmm. And then the next day I have 2, and then the next day I have 5 again. I'm like, so it's weird. And someone once told me, and I don't know how accurate this is, but it feels accurate because I didn't do the research on it. And I'm just face value believing it, which is horrible, but I believe it, is that at any given point in time, there are at least hundreds or thousands of iterations of different code blocks for apps and stuff that they're testing out, A/B testing,
Absolutely.
to see what's going to get a better response and how are people going to react.
Yeah. So I don't know to what scale the iterations happen per big tech company. But when we look at what we call FANG, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, right, the big 5, then we know that this testing is happening. So the question then becomes like, all right, what does that actually mean for the user? What does that mean for the everyday person? What that means is that what you're thinking is a universal experience is highly personal. And to me, that is both a powerful thing and a terrifying thing, right? If I'm scrolling on Instagram and it's my feed, right? And the part of me is going to want to share that stuff with friends, and I do. But it's coming from a place of like, you see this too, right? Our feeds are similar. They're not.
No.
Right? What we listen to, it's not the same stuff, right? So, and this becomes the way that we learn about each other, though, right? When we look at, as I said, the way that we communicate, the way that we exchange, the way that we express ourselves, the way that we keep track of our information and history, if it can be served up to us for engagement and for benefit, because that's what the apps do, and we don't know that because they haven't said that, then we're taking something as reality that's really highly curated. And, that whole concept has now gone beyond social media. A lot of people say, just don't trust TikTok because it's social media, but then they get on Apple News. Mm-hmm. Fun fact, Apple News uses the same algorithm base that Instagram and TikTok use. It's the same one that Netflix uses. It's the same one that Hulu uses.
Because they're all, it's good.
It's good.
If they're good, they're using it, yes.
Because it's about the data, right? So when we've seen this happen before, we were to think about old school marketing. These were the guys who would come up with the phony lines to get you to buy something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you knew that they were selling you because they knocked on your door. It's the vacuum sales cleaner, right? He's like, I can make this work for your whole house. You don't even have to do anything. You just plug it in and it goes. And that's not true.
And you got to do the demo and all that, and then you're hooked.
Now that's everything. Because of jackasses like me.
Right. You're part of the problem.
I am absolutely part of the problem, right? Who are saying, whoa, if we can understand what you're watching and we can break that down to increments. And like as a creator, you get to hear a lot of this of like, how many 3-second views did you get? How many 5-second views did you get? How many 10-second views? How many shares? How many licks? How many engage? All this kind of stuff, right? How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? Like that's essentially where it's getting to.
Yeah.
But they're able to count it, right? And when you're getting that a lot of data on a personal level, doesn't really matter, right? They're not worried about Evante. They're not worried about what I am individually doing.
Right.
What they are worried about is Black men ages 25 to 30 in San Francisco Bay Area. That's a group. That's a community. That's a group of people.
Yeah. It's a collective of minds, right?
So when we talk about a collective of minds, we're talking about this thing called cultural consciousness, how a group collectively feels about something. And before we had to kind of guess at this, right? How do people feel about the president? Well, we'll look at the polls, we'll see the approval ratings, but we don't really, do we know? You know, is it coming from the pundit? Is it coming from grandma? Like who's saying this stuff? Now, through TikTok, through Instagram, where everybody can post, right? Everybody can share, everybody can comment. We suddenly can understand and see not the individual, but the collective whole. And we're now in a place where people are deciding how to use that collective whole, which to me is terrifying.
Yeah, because you can use that in so many bad ways. So many bad ways.
So let's talk about a time when it was used in a bad way.
Yeah, let's go ahead, because I think I wanted to make sure we segued into...
This is going to lead right to the book.
Yeah, let's go right into that.
So this is actually from chapter 4 in the book. Have you ever heard of a company called Purdue Pharma?
Sounds familiar.
So Purdue Pharma is the company behind Oxy.
Okay.
Right. There's a show on Netflix. It's called Painkiller. It's a creative docuseries. I highly recommend people watch it because it gives a good accounting of the story. But in the 90s, the medical industry was in a place where they were redeciding how to talk about pain. Pain, a highly subjective thing. How are you able to use this for diagnoses if it's all subjective, right? My mom's pain tolerance is low, mine's really high, right? And so they were trying to really figure that out. And that happens, right? We come to conclusions on stuff. We ask that question about gender, about sexuality, about race, right? So as humans collectively, from that collective consciousness, we have these moments where we go, we were not thinking about this right. And in that moment, Purdue Pharma, and in the Netflix series, they make it really about the CEO, because they're like, the CEO's the big guy. And we all know that it's more of a team situation. But he drops this quote. And it's Matthew Broderick who plays the CEO. And so now I actually have a little beef with Matthew Broderick because he played that character too well. But he says the human existence runs in a loop from pain to pleasure. Right? You experience too much pleasure, you experience pain. Let's put that into a real perspective. We're talking about festival. Right?
Yeah,
you're outside
pleasure.
the festival, you're drinking, you throw up, maybe a natural deodorant ain't working no more.
Oh my God.
Right? So you're suffering.
Yep.
And so now you're hurting. Right? So maybe you take a break, or maybe you get some food and then you eat too much. Right? It's good. And you just keep eating and now you're full. Pain. Right? And so it's this cycle where we're like, oh, I just did that. I ate too much, or I drank too much. Now I need to alleviate this suckiness that I'm feeling in this hangover. And so I'm going to do this thing. And what Sackler said was, if we can control the switch from pain to pleasure, we will never have to worry about money again. If we can control where people are going from pain to pleasure, we'll never have to worry about money again. Now, for me, the big thing that stood out to me in that phrase...
And this is coming from a pharmaceutical
company.
Like perspective. Got it.
Right. So what hit me in that phrase is that's not a pharmaceutical perspective. That's a marketing perspective.
True.
That is a money perspective. That's not a people perspective.
You're not trying to help someone. You're trying to,
Right. So what do? They make this pill. They make Oxy. They do the testing like they have to do. Come to find out, it's super addictive. Shocker. We didn't know. Right? So they just sweep that under the rug.
Yeah.
They do one independent study, mess up the results on a whole different level, and then get to this place where the producer of this pill, right, is the same one who's telling you about this pill. Right? So if you think about it as a doctor, pharmaceutical person approaches you and they say, we've got this pain medicine that's actually from general use all the way to surgery. You only need to prescribe one kind of pill, just varying doses. Here's all the research we've done on it. Here's all the stuff we've done on it. And the doctors read it and it looks good, right? And then they're incentivized on top of it. And so they're buying it and they're suckered, right? They're suckered by this company who's writing brochures and pamphlets for the product that they are pushing. Is the product the problem? No. What's the problem is how they're selling it. It's how they're talking about it, right? And what's that's coming down is to a sales department. It's the sales team. It's the marketing team, right? It's these guys going, well, man, if we say it's addictive, that's just not going to work for us, right? And eventually, where does this go? By 2001, Purdue Pharma was spending $2 million advertising one pill in the Appalachian, Pennsylvania region of the country. Funny enough, that's where the opioid crisis started. what happened is Purdue Pharma realized if we incentivize these doctors not to prescribe on the amount of prescriptions and like keep track of that, but we actually track the amount of dosages, the amount that they are dosing with, and we incentivize them to continue to dose up more, then we can get more insurance money. Right? So then they get sorority girls, young, beautiful women to be the salespeople.
Right.
And they tell them it's painless. The drug's not going to do anything to these people. It's going to help them. And anyone who gets addicted to it was born an addict. So now, right, this conversation's changed. We were in a place as a country in the 90s where we were reestablishing how we talked about pain. And by 2001, that conversation was completely controlled by one pharmaceutical company, not through pharmaceutical technology, but through marketing, through billboards, through little plushies of the pill that said, "Hi, I'm here for you." But let's be real, we knew it was addictive from day one.
Yeah.
If you were a blue collar worker and you hurt your back or you hurt yourself, and you went to the doctor and they prescribed Oxy, you got addicted to it. And it had a diminishing effect after a period of time. So you go back, the pain comes back. You go to your doctor, you're like, I don't know what's going on. I've got this pain. And he goes, all right, well, I'll give you some more, because he's incentivized to give you more dosage, right? So then you do it again. You come back and you're like, I still got this pain. And gives you another dosage. And let's say miracle works, it happens, you're good. You don't need it again, right? You kind of realize, this is getting a little weird, but your pain's good, you recover.
Highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely. But let's say it did, right? Let's say you get injured again a couple years down the road. You're working for a living, something happens. You go back to your doctor. Your brain's already hardwired now for an addiction. So you go, you get the Oxy, which is becoming more and more expensive because Purdue just wants to make the money off of it, right? So maybe it doesn't, you don't shake it this time. Maybe the pain doesn't really go away. Maybe you just have to keep coming back for more pills. And eventually your doctor remembers that they're a doctor and they go, whoa, I can't give you any more of these. You have a problem, dude. You've got a substance abuse problem. You need to go get that handled. All you wanted to do was not feel pain.
Right.
But now we've introduced this system that has said, here's the escape. You didn't know it was the escape. So now you can't access Oxy. So what do you turn to? You turn to heroin. What if it's in 2015? You may turn to fentanyl, which is 50 times deadlier than heroin. Right? And so
and this is where we are currently.
This is where we are currently, right? So I look at Purdue Pharma, a company that was upwards in making billions of dollars, right? By 2018, 500,000 overdoses had been counted by Oxy alone. That's not including heroin. That's not including any other synthetic opioid. That's not including anything else other than Oxy. This company killed 500,000 people through sales and marketing, through lying and hiding the truth and saying, because we can control the story, we can tell you what it's going to be. And you won't ever have to know because we're us. Right?
And aren't you in that industry?
I am. I am. So I'm pissed off.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm like, you're fucking with people. You're messing with their minds. You're really coming after them and you're turning them into suckers. And you're loving every second of it. You've turned our medical industry into the same thing. They demonize kids for selling shit on the streets, but you got your doctor doing it.
Yeah. Legally,
right? Turning you into addicts to push you out there.
Yeah.
I now live in a city where 2023, we had more overdoses on fentanyl than we had ever had in San Francisco. We now have immigrants coming in from Honduras who now believe in the dream of coming to America to sell opiates because of the crisis. The CEO of Purdue Pharma is not in jail. He paid a fine. He's able to be on a board of another company. He's able to do all of these guys. They don't talk about the sales director. They don't talk about the chief of marketing. These guys are still out here.
Yeah.
They're still after the money because it's good money. And they found what worked. And that was all before we had TikTok.
Dude.
That was all before we had Google Ads. You couldn't run an ad to reach on the other side of the world for $2 million back in the day. They did all of that damage from one region of the United States. We have a completely destroyed concept of addicts and substance abuse completely because of what Purdue Pharma started in the 90s. We have people who cannot receive substance care because federal law dictates that you have to be clean to get help. How are you supposed to get clean from fentanyl by yourself? You take too much of it and you die. You take too little of it and you're hooked. They paid a $6 billion fine. That's all they did. That's the only punishment they got.
Dude, I can tell you are passionate about this.
I'm furious.
Yeah, I can tell.
Because we also write the stories that go on Netflix. We're the people who wrote the Netflix series called Painkiller. We're the one who decided to make the CEO the big bad. Not the chief of marketing, not the chief of sales, not the chief of product, not the team, just the CEO. We decided because it's easier for you to palate it as you talk about this stuff, that we're gonna make up a singular vision, a singular story that is kind of in the right direction, but not really. In every brand, every company has people in marketing, and it's our jobs to decide what the narrative is. And we have never, ever been held accountable to the implications of what we do. We are now in a place where I'm sure you've heard of Ozempic, which is going viral.
Yeah, because there's so many people all of a sudden going from big to small.
Right. We were in a place where people were really starting to have conversations around body positivity and how to feel about your weight. And then we introduced a drug that takes you to go slim and lose all this weight all over again. Ozempic isn't a weight loss drug. It's a diabetes drug.
Right.
Right.
And
Now,
the commercial, the ad, if I can remember correctly, you may know exactly what I'm going with this, is that they talk about the diabetic component of it, but they say it may also lead to weight loss.
Yep. So we have to think about it, right? Who created the ad?
Probably Purdue. I mean, or
Right. Someone in marketing created the ad for this company, right? It wasn't the scientists who created
Yeah, you're right. Somebody in
Ozempic.
marketing, yeah.
It's some dude in a marketing department who said, okay, you guys created the product. Now I have the product. How would I sell it?
sell it for weight loss. I mean, easy.
Right. They found out that's a benefit, so they sold it. Now it's going on TikTok. Now it's going viral on social media, which is something that Purdue Pharma didn't have. Right? Where money can go a lot further into other countries. One company is now able to completely change the global conversation on how we see each other and ourselves. And there's no one, the government can't stop it because it's marketing, it's talking. Right?
Yeah,
there's no regulation on that. There's no slap on the wrist.
Oh.
And so we're caught in this place now where Apple tells you that they're here for your personal and private security, or Facebook says that, and the whole time they're just selling it and having you tap dance for them and perform for them. But then they say, well, you got likes and follows, so that means something. If Instagram goes down, your followers are done. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a game. It is an absolute game. And it's a game that has been played for a very long time, and we haven't had a way against it. If you had the power, you wrote the story, you had the rules, right? If we think about kings and queens, right, who had messengers and knights and people who could do their decrees and the right, that's how people heard about from the kings and the queens and all that kind of stuff. Now the ways that we communicate, it's all digital. Mm-hmm. So you have these people who own the means of distribution. And you have other people who have understood how to take advantage of that. And what I call that whole idea, that there is a way that we are headed, and then someone goes, ooh, let me do my little thing, and we all kind of tilt. Mm-hmm. I call that cultural de-alignment. Because we're headed in a good direction. We're headed to making progress. I'm not saying that we've ever been perfect. You know, we've made and will continue to make mistakes. But the direction that we are headed in, the things that we thought were wrong 15 years ago, we don't think, right? Like it's changed. The way we talk about mental health, about sexuality, about gender, about spirituality has evolved over time as we've gotten to know one another. People who weren't like us, right? That's dangerous for someone who wants to control a group of people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, this kind of goes back to the whole idea of TikTok being banned, is that there's this sense that the United States government wants to limit control of the voices that. Now, this could be borderline conspiracy theorists. But
it's not. I'm gonna go ahead and hit it for you.
Okay, there you go.
So the senators have actually clearly said the 60 who signed the bill before it went to the president's desk made it very clear that the concern around TikTok isn't around your data privacy. It's around pro-Palestinian support. They are concerned, very simply, because there are people in the actual situation who are doing nothing more than reporting about what's happening in their neighborhood. And there is a group of people who are saying, I don't think they need to see that. Remember when Flint, Michigan didn't have clean water? They still don't.
Yeah, they still don't.
Right.
You don't hear about it anymore. Exactly.
Does that mean the problem disappeared?
Out of sight, out of mind.
So now we're in a different space.
Yes.
Right? Where we're more connected than ever before, but it's all being served up in front of you. Where even the United States government has an agenda because they have to.
It's being curated.
It has to be curated.
Yeah.
And so will TikTok get banned? No, because these people do not want to see what happens when the younger generations.
Oh, it'd be bad.
It'd be terrible.
Yeah.
And also, we've just never had anything into the situation, but the conversation is being brought up to it, right? The way that people talk about TikTok, the way that people talk about social media comes from places that it isn't necessarily about the actual experience. It's not about the shared experience that we've had, about the memes and the community and all this stuff, right? It's about what someone has said about the platform. Talk to any teenager about why they're on social media. It's to be in community and connect with people. It's not to be escaping the real world.
Right.
It's to have community. That's not, right? That's not what we're told.
Yeah.
Right? So we have to continually be in this space where we're like, what you're telling me isn't true. It's not the full story. And maybe you're not telling me the full story, not from a place of nefariousness like Purdue Pharma. Maybe you're telling me the full story because you think I'm too stupid to understand the actuality of what's going on. Or we think it's going to ruin the conversion rate. I don't want to tell them that we're still in their private data because they may not sign up. Now we're in this space. And so for me, I feel and I get enraged because marketing and creativity and talking about products and all this stuff can change the whole conversation. When we talk about things like gun rights, no one's against fixing a situation where kids aren't getting shot in school.
Right.
No one's against that.
No.
But depending on what talking point they've heard, they're going to feel a certain way about it.
Yeah, so there's a narrative behind it.
Right?
Yep.
When we talk about Black Lives Matter,
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I know, yeah.
a lot of people were like, I'm not actually against black people.
Right.
And they weren't. But that phrase got wrapped up into other stuff and people freaked out in ways. And then they had terrible reactions that showed sometimes more true colors than they even didn't know they had. It's the narrative. It's not what's being said on the headline, right? It's not the flyer. It's what that flyer makes you say in the living room. It's what that commercial makes you talk about with your spouse, with your kids. It's that when you see a news story and you go, ooh, that's a dangerous part of town, right? Think about the kids who grew up between 9/11, between Y2K and 2008. Think about how their parents talked about the government. From Y2K happening to 9/11 happening, to the war on terror, to the housing crisis bubble popping, their parents getting laid off, right? Those same kids, some of them were in high school when the shooting started. Some of them graduated college when COVID was happening. Right? All they have is each other. And all they have are the conversations that they've been told. And so, of course, they're not going to trust the system. Because since 2001, they've seen, right? And they heard. And regardless if that's their belief or not, that's the conversation. And so we're now in this space for the first time ever where we can actually contribute to the conversation. We're talking about 1.3 million people on active monthly. No, sorry, that's actually the wrong number. 1.3 billion people are active on Instagram every month. Meta makes more GDP than most countries. Okay? If you were to actually look at them as a sovereign nation, they have more population than us.
They have a lot of control.
They have a lot. There are 100 million people on TikTok in the United States. 1 out of every 3 people in the United States is on TikTok. We have the ability to talk about whatever we need to talk about, wherever we want to talk about it, and not have it really limited to a high extent. Sure, there's content moderation. You can't say certain things, but you can say a lot.
You can say a lot. Look, and you push the limits.
I do.
I've seen you do it.
I do. And like I've always found, and look, it's been a long time since I've been banned, right? But I've been able to share that message with a lot of people. I've been able to communicate and meet a lot of people through this platform. And we're able to build awareness, and we're able to talk about the actual circumstance. We're able to see the real story. We're able to see what it's like in the bunkers in Ukraine when the war is going on, because there's a guy with a smartphone who's filming it. We've never had that access before.
So on that same vein, in 2020, when the protests were happening and all of that, on the news media, it was portrayed in one way. On TikTok, there were things that I've seen on there that would have never made it to broadcast news, like some rough stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether that be one lean of or the other, wherever that would lean to, but still, like it was like literal boots on the ground, and I didn't see that from Facebook.
No.
I didn't see that from Instagram. And it was weird that I go to TikTok and I say the algorithm is probably just amazing because
it is a really good one.
So you'll see a video and you're like, okay, I'm going to like this video, and hopefully, like, if you want to come back for a part 2, either the part 2 is coming out next, or in a day or two it's being served to you. But like the algorithm really was so on point with showing me what I needed to see for a situation.
Right.
That I was seeing flowers and I was seeing rainbows on these other social media networks.
Right.
Where I feel like, going back to being a curated content and there were certain voices being limited, TikTok was just like Wild Wild West. Like, here's like the stuff that you're not seeing. And
because the goal of TikTok was really straightforward, right? Their goal, their algorithm, and most of these platforms, all of these platforms work off of a basic rule. It's what you engage with.
Yep.
Right?
Exactly.
Now, we're not saying that if you write a comment and you say, I don't like this, you're still engaging with it.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's it. Look, and I love when people post negative comments. I'm like,
you're going to see more of me, bro.
Exactly. You're doing the wrong thing if you don't want to.
Right. I have the quote from Princess Bride. He is like, you've fallen for the classic blunder. Like, I bring that up all the time with people where they're like falling for a troll. And it's like, these platforms don't care about what you say.
Right.
Let's be very clear about that real quick.
You engaged in general.
You engaged. What they want is your data. The way they get your data is by you being on the platform. They will add new features to keep you on the platform longer. They will add new ways for you to communicate and exchange and do stuff.
Would you say it's addicting? Almost like a pharmaceutical situation.
Shocker.
Yeah, it's weird.
Who would have thought?
We're being served. God, dude.
But this is the way now that we have community. Yeah. And we have to understand that, right? We're not saying throw away the platform. We're not saying throw away the feed, which is, I call that collective experience of not just social media, but all the other ones I mentioned as well, right? We're saying that if we know that in the heart of this is a data infrastructure, right, that is trying to get my data, and we know that they want to see me engage, then why don't I engage with things that are going to make the difference I want to see? If TikTok had existed and been at the place it is now, when Flint, Michigan needed clean water originally.
Oh, dude, big change.
Everybody I brought that up to immediately says that. And the funny thing is, they're like, oh, TikTok's evil. Like, you bring up this example, and what we're talking about is a worldwide level of awareness. And then you do that, and you come back to reality, and you do in-person action, right? If you tell people, yo, meet up, come out, you gonna find me, I'm gonna be here. Right? On social media, you can't say that much louder.
Right.
For free.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, I'm like, this is the time. This is your moment to grab the mic because you have the mic. It's in your pocket.
Everybody has a mic.
Everybody has the mic.
Yeah.
So when the New York Times posts something and it's not accurate, you have a mic too. You got an Instagram account too. You know, the New York Times, you know how many followers they had when they first started? 0. How many followers did I have when I first started? 0. How many followers did the president have when he first started? 0.
Exactly.
Right? On these digital platforms, you really do have a lot more power than you think you do. Because like I said, the platform, for the first time ever, the people who distribute what we're talking about don't care what we're talking about. Right? Before, if it was the music labels, if it was news, right? Ted Turner was the first one to come up with 24/7 news, CNN, right? He could not share that to the whole country immediately. He had to decide on people who he could sell it to first, and that happened to be coastal cities, right? So he looked at what they valued, and he made sure to focus on that. That's how you get this kind of focus on CNN. Well, then what does that leave for other companies like Fox, Well, if the coastal has been taken, I guess we have to look at the heartland. I wonder what those guys are thinking.
Completely different.
Right. And so because it's money.
Yep.
And it's always been money.
It's always been money. Everything's
always
around
been,
money.
It's
Yes.
money.
Yeah.
Cream. Cash rules everything, right? Like that's where we're at. And so to tell people that you have to do the work to find truth. It's more accessible than ever before. You got an encyclopedia in your pocket. But you acting like these institutions care about you, these brands are having your back, that they want to see you do well, that they want to see you informed and educated, they don't. They want to see you like, click, subscribe, and buy. And that's it.
Dude. It's so, you think about all this stuff, you know this in the back of your head, but when you like have conversations about it and you just, to see the other shared experiences, it's wild. There was a thought that I had a few minutes ago, talking about drugs and addiction and all that, and mindsets being changed over the course of several decades.
Yeah.
There was a video on TikTok that I saw, and it was an old commercial that someone shared, and it was like from the early 90s. And I watched this commercial just because I was scrolling through, doom scrolling, and then I said, something caught me in there, and I always look at the comments because, look, the content itself is usually good. Sometimes it's not, but opening up the comments is content by itself.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
I looked at this video. I said, something's weird with it. And I looked at the comments, and it confirmed. They're like pointing out what I thought I saw. So I went back and rewatched it. It was a commercial about how weed is bad.
Interesting.
It was like showing this guy having
Odd take in 2024, to be real with you.
Correct. But in the early 90s, it was like, it looked like it was filmed in the 80s, but I think it was the 90s. They showed this guy smoking a blunt and coughing and, doing the whole thing. And they had this kid coming around from the bush, crossing his arms and shaking his head like, you shouldn't be doing that. And it was about how it's the death drug. They called it the death drug in quotes.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I know. And I'm like, dude, that's so weird to think about marijuana that way now. And then at the end of the commercial, it had the Department of something, some kind of government label.
Yes.
And then they also had cigs for kids.
The tobacco industry was behind it.
It was also the National Cigarette Foundation or something logo.
Right.
It was like, I was like, that was a legit commercial?
Right. So this is what we have to understand.
Exactly.
Right. Is that when things have popped up, it's always cost something to make it happen. When we were back in the traditional TV era, before we had streaming, before we had 100 channels on DirecTV or anything, when it was back down to like 20, right? You only had a few companies
that controlled all of that.
They controlled all of that. You only had a little bit of airtime because it was a really limited source, right? And so when you think about it, if you're going to call someone and say, hey, I want to sell my cigarettes to you, right? I want to sell the cigarettes to people. They go, cool, you got 30 seconds, bro. Okay? And it's going to cost you a couple mil. All right, when we look at the Super Bowl, this is exactly how the Super Bowl works, right?
Yeah.
So we can talk about the Beyonce Super Bowl commercial because this is a perfect example of this, right? It costs like $7 million for that spot. So when you think about that as an investment, then you have to be really careful about what you're putting out there. And for us, it's a commercial. It's 30 seconds. But in those 30 seconds, the amount of work that I have to do to think through every line, every color, who's popping up, the music, what's going to be the call to action, all of these pieces is not from a place of sincerity. It's from a place of psychological ops and saying, what do I understand about the human mind and how can I make you do something you didn't think you wanted to do?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. And so Beyonce, this is brilliant. And like, I love Beyonce. And this is a masterclass in how you do it. Beyonce's team approaches Verizon and says, yo, you want Beyonce in one of your commercials?
Of course.
Who wouldn't? So that's a bill, right? They get to charge Verizon for her being in the commercial. And they go, by the way, we may want to drop or announce an album in this commercial. So we need you to get the best spot. which is the one right before the halftime show. Again, is Beyonce paying for that? No. Verizon is. So Verizon pays Beyonce. Then Verizon pays, what is that, CBS for Super Bowl, I think?
I think so.
Pays CBS for the spot. Who's in the commercial? Beyonce. What's the commercial promoting? Beyonce. While talking about Verizon's sustainable network. But what is it really about? Beyonce.
Yeah.
Right? So the Beyonce team is a genius. Because they got paid and had the bill covered and had the best spot. Right? But when we say that's a commercial, is it? It's just another piece of content. If that popped up on TikTok or Twitter, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know that that was paid for like that.
Right.
Right? So what we're paying for is attention. We're paying for the spot. And so when we know that we can have the money to get that spot, it's about what we can do with it, what we can get people to do with it. And we know the percentages. Like I think about this all the time. There are what we call conversion rates. We want to know how many people are going to buy something out of this. And if it's on Facebook or something like that, you can see the numbers, but on TV and radio, you really couldn't. And so it was like, okay, how many people are going to convert by watching this piece? Right?
And conversion rates are usually in the lower end.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a crapshoot.
Mm-hmm.
It's a crapshoot based off of toxic gas, right? We're trying to give you something real quick that's going to make you do something that's a lot longer in impact than 30 seconds. And the things that we hold true and dear from a brand standpoint, from a company standpoint, from the people that we believe support us, not to say that they don't, but a lot of it comes down to marketing and advertising.
Yeah.
Right? Apple is a fashion company, not a technology company. If you were to look at their computers, you were to look at their features, all their features are a few years old.
It's very nice.
It's very nice, right? But they never introduce new tech that's never been certified first.
Right.
Right? But what they do introduce is a seamless experience for the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And it lets people talk and says, hey, you have an Android? Oh, God, dude.
Which is hilarious because in the United States,
green bubbles?
right? Like green bubble envy and like the anger against the green bubble. In the United States, we're like 47% of the market is Apple. But in the world, it's 17%. The blue bubble is the minority.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're not taught that here.
It's a fashion statement. It's what it is. And it's a way to just call it what it is, bully people who do not have an iPhone.
Exactly.
And it's funny because I don't do research on this, but I see a lot of information because I love technology and I'm an Apple fan guy. I won't say that Android's bad. I just prefer Apple because I like the seamless experience, and that's just my prerogative. But I don't go around like a preacher saying, you need to switch to Apple. Yeah. But Apple purposely does not upgrade their systems to accommodate the Android user experience.
Yes, this is actually being dealt with in the European Union right now.
Exactly. And it's so interesting that they purposely keep their stuff outdated, in respect to outdated, to not allow for that to happen, because they know that what that green bubble does is it sells more product.
So in my book, in Power Beats and Rhymes, I actually talk about the blue bubble phenomenon.
Dude, awesome.
And I talk about it in a chapter where we're talking about tactics that companies and what I call these cultural de-aligners use, right, to change things. And so what Apple does is a concept called fragmentation. What they're doing is they're breaking down the collective whole into a more manageable part. And really what we get to is a place of diffusion, which is when you make it impossible for those pieces to come back together. Right. And so by Apple not using RCS and still really relying on SMS, which is a lower level of encryption, therefore risking your personal security, by the way, they get to separate you into a camp and they get to put little fence posts around it and keep you there. Right. But as people, we don't want to be that way. We want to get to know people. We want the culture is how we connect and comes together. And so that's why the European Union is saying, no, you have to use a USB-C cable. No, you got to actually remove this separation. So it seems silly to us because we're like, what? But it's these small things. Remember I said it's the small differences that really separate us and make us pull back from each other. Could be the coolest person you ever met. You send a green bubble and you don't want to talk to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That's marketing. That's all that is.
And it all comes back to marketing. God.
It's communications and marketing. It's how we talk about the bubble. It's how we talk. A color change is responsible for 47.5% of the market share. That's it.
It's so wild.
right? So these things are simple. So then the question becomes, and this
Yeah.
is what the book deals with, right? Is this concept of power. That power today comes down to communication and influence. If you're able to communicate something, you're able to get people to believe it and what it takes to do that. So what are we supposed to do, right? Hip hop teaches us the answer here, because hip hop, when it started in the 80s, started not in a studio, but at a block party.
Yeah,
Started
on the street.
in the community, where beats were being made and people were rapping, right? And so from there, everybody had access. When we look at the first time hip hop pops up, Clive Campbell and his sister Sarah Campbell throw a block party in South Bronx in 1983. At that block party, Clive Campbell's DJing, and he throws up a track from 1969 by James Brown, and he loops it to another track. This creates the first loop, as we consider it in hip hop. It's the first sample. Shortly after that, people start speaking on top of those beats. But he did it at a block party. He didn't copyright it. He didn't create a 7-hour course and sell it online. He just did it, right? And everybody goes, oh, I know what you did, because you looped 2 records together. And so it spread like wildfire. So from the very beginning, if we were to slow it down, we say, this is the democratization of access. This is where we say everybody can get it, right? We talked about in tech earlier that some people didn't have access to learn about coding or technology equipment, right? For hip hop, everybody's parents had vinyl. Everybody had at least one record player.
At least.
And somebody else had another record player, right? And so where this started was where we were at. And all of the barriers that had existed in music before, when we look at rock and roll, you had to know how to play an instrument, right? You had to have some kind of classical understanding. You had to at least have been self-taught or actually taught, which means you had to pay for classes. You had to have the time accessibility. You had to be able to afford the instrument. You had to be able to afford studio time.
All expensive.
All expensive, and that was suddenly replaced by a boombox.
Yeah.
Right? So in that moment, suddenly the people have a voice, because suddenly we don't have to try to find a way to get to have a voice. And so when it passed from person to person, it gained strength the same way a meme does on TikTok. If you find it funny and you send it to me and I find it funny and I send it to them and they find it funny, by the time it makes it to California, all these other people have found it funny, which is why it's making it. For hip hop, what it was if you spoke and you said some whack stuff, you didn't talk again, because the community didn't let you. They said, sit your ass down. You're not the one, right? But if you spoke and you spit some fire, they say, yo, that's deaf. That's fire. And what they meant is you're speaking it.
Yeah.
And we get Def Jam after that, right? So like this, we continue to support the people. The experts weren't experts because they went to Harvard. They were experts because they understood their community and their culture. And the community said, you're right. And so we're going to put you on. We're going to share you. And so it popped up. So it goes from block to block to block. It goes from South Bronx to Staten Island, right? Which is where Wu-Tang is discovered. But Wu-Tang is discovered on a college radio station by Tommy Boy. So there's a huge gap between rapping on the street and popping up on a college radio station. And that gap is all culture. That gap is all people sharing and expressing and working together and sharing these pieces and not charging, right? Grandmaster Flash didn't charge for courses, right? He taught that if you marked your vinyl with a crayon, you could have a wax line so you knew how to make 3-beat. That's how he did it. And he just shared that stuff. There's no intellectual property. There's, you got to do it different because I'm already doing it. I'm out here.
Yeah.
I'm working. I have a voice. You can't copy my voice because I'm still talking. Do your own thing. And then because it's democratized access, it's whatever the community has. It's stone soup, right? It's the story of bringing everything together and seeing what comes out of it. In Atlanta, we invented the 808. Heavy bass sound.
Yeah, love it.
Love it. It's because of the access the guys at Dungeon House had when they created that sound. It's because of the programs and the pieces that they had. So when we have an Atlanta sound, it didn't come from a record label. It came from some guys who were working together and had a shared experience and collaborated and partnered and got over themselves and worked on stuff and then said, do you rock with this? And they said, yeah, I rock with that. You need to do more of that. We bring that energy back to everything. Because now we're not just talking about music. We're talking about politics. We're talking about business. We're talking about economic development. We're talking about racism in your community, misogyny, body positivity, whatever you want to go after, you name it, you name your op, you can do it. Because now the same access that these guys had when they were grabbing their parents' records and writing beats out and spitting rhymes about things that were happening in their communities, you're able to do that again.
Yeah.
But now on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube, and like we said, the platform don't care. So you can speak up. And if you learn how to do it in the way that all these chumps have been doing it from day one to make it viral, to make it catchy, to make it the thing you want to buy.
Yep.
If you learn how to do that, then suddenly you can sell authenticity. You can sell the truth. You can talk about the issues in your community exactly how you want to. You can say the issue isn't the addict. The issue is these companies continue to pump this shit in our communities and no one holds them accountable because it's not the product, it's the marketing people. You can say that for the first time ever, and you don't have to go through some censorship thing. You don't have to approach some producer and go, please, sir, will you support my project? I just want to get it out there. You can just go on TikTok, go live, and pop off. And guess what? If you're right, and if people rock with you, it's going to get shared.
Yeah. So you mentioned when on the street, when you say something that's, like you said, whack and just doesn't make sense, the equivalent to that of being told to sit down is not being shared, nothing happening.
No, you don't have engagement.
And people always, like I'll see on TikTok, people that are like, that blow up and have their 15 minutes of fame.
Yep.
And they feel like, oh man, I can ride this. And then at a certain point, their content becomes lame and no longer interesting.
Right.
And then they make a video about, I've been shadow banned, this and that. I'm like, you haven't been shadow banned. Now, some people have.
No, but these guys are clout chasing.
Yeah, you have not been shadow banned. You're just no longer relevant because what you thought you can ride on for so long is now outdated, and people are telling you to sit down. Well, essentially,
right. Well, suddenly you've made it to a place where you're infatuated with the fame, and you forgot how you got there.
Yep.
Right. So, like, this is a big issue in rap, just in general. We look at Diddy right now. And like,
did he do it?
He did. Yeah, he absolutely did. If you have any questions around it, he absolutely did. He did everything that they were accusing him of, and he did more. And so did the rest of the industry, by the way. He's not an exception to the rule. He's the norm. Just to be clear.
Oh, yeah. This is an industry issue.
This is an industry issue. This is a quiet narrative that you're not hearing about, where people are literally being brought into a place of exploitation to make it, because the people who maintained and held onto those places of distribution could set the rules, right? And so now we're not necessarily having to do it that way. That option still exists. You can still go to Universal Music Group. You can still do all the stuff. You can sign to the label, and you can do the dance, and you can tap it out. You can Uncle Tom your way through it. You can do it. You can absolutely do it. But you're going to end up in the same situation that Diddy's in today. Diddy created Bad Boy Records, and when he was 23. Dude didn't know anything. Mm-hmm. He got fired from a job as an A&R. Clive Davis paid for everything. He was a puppet from day one. We just have to understand that he was fooled just like the rest of us were. And he is as much of a victim as he is an oppressor. That this is where it is. So then what does rap do to counteract stuff like that? Well, you have the label side of rap, right? But then you also have underground rap. Mm-hmm. You have guys like Open Mike Eagle. You have MF Doom. You have Killer Mike. You got guys who were rocking independent way before independent was a thing. And you realize when you look at rap that our Mount Rushmore changes all the time, right? If you were good in 2010s, you may not be good now. Right now, we're in the biggest rap beef we've had in a few years. And, Kendrick's out here saying there ain't no big three, it's just Big Me, right? And now we've got Chris Brown going against Quavo. We got all this stuff happening. And however that resolves is going to put a different ranking out there because the community is going to decide which one of those they think is better. And that's different. For the first time, you don't have to go listen to the critic. You can go listen to the bars and go, I thought that was whack. And you're valid because you're part of the community. You're who they're speaking to. And when we think about that as an artist, right, as a creator, you now have to respect your audience the same way rappers had to respect it from the beginning. You have to respect the culture. Mm-hmm. You have to respect where you at. You have to respect who you're talking to. Because if you talk to them wrong, if you come incorrectly, then you're done. Kanye was on Sway in the Morning one time, and he tried to make it through the 5 Fingers of Death, and he failed miserably. And halfway through it, he just starts freaking out. He's like, I don't have the answer, Sway. I can't do it. Because he got caught. Yeah. He's not a rapper. He's a producer. But you try to act like something that you're not, rap is going to find a way through that. Because it's all about the community. And from an ingrained sense, it talks about authenticity. So when we talk about hip hop, we talk about Cardi B interviewing Bernie Sanders in 2020, right? It was one of the best interviews we've ever seen from a non-political pundit because Cardi B didn't have an agenda. She was curious. So she asked the questions that her audience was also curious about. And it was an awkward ass interview. Bernie got asked questions that he wasn't used to being asked.
Right. And I think that's good.
That's great.
Yeah.
So now we're in a space, right, where Cardi B can interview a presidential candidate. And sure, you're going to hear on the news that she's a former stripper and you should demonize her because of that. And she's not intelligent. She got more money than you. She's doing this stuff. And she's speaking to people. And the reason that she's at the place that she's at isn't just because of selling out or doing industry deals. It's because the music that she's made and the bars that she's written resonate with people. Mm-hmm. And that's where the power is. That's culture. And for the first time, I'm like, that goes around the world. Right now, Iran just announced that they're going to be executing a rapper in the next couple of weeks because he's been voicing support against the Iranian government, who are dictators. When we look at other countries who are fighting against oppression, one of the first ways they come at it is through hip hop around the globe. And when these guys, when the government and these other organizations are looking at opportunities, they shut down the MCs first because they know through shared experience, we all bond together. If you talk about what's happening in your house and someone goes, yo, that's happening in my house too, suddenly you have a lot more in common than you had different. That's where we're at. And so what the book is about, what Free Your Feet is about, what all of this is about, is saying that for the first time, we have the ability to counteract the narratives that have been shoved down our throats for years, that have put us in terrible positions, that have changed the way that Black men talked about mental health, about leadership, about Black womanhood, about how we treat people, about how we treat ourselves, about self-care, about substance abuse. And we don't have to be in a spot anymore where someone's telling us how to feel about a person. We don't have to listen to someone just say, that's a bad guy, and not know them.
Yeah.
And we can also be safe as we learn about them. You can go on TikTok and learn about Palestine. Ain't nobody gonna slap you.
Right.
You can go see what Israel's doing. You can go see the women and children who are dead. You can go see the hospitals that are bombed. And you can decide for yourself how you feel about it. That's more onus on the individual than we've ever had before. You can't rely on these guys to tell you how to think because they're serving it up, and they've been serving it up, but you didn't have an option before. Now you do. Mm-hmm. Now you have the ability to say what's right and what's wrong. You have the ability to be humbled by your community when you say the wrong thing. And you have the ability to care about your block more than you ever could before, to bring resources, to bring change into your community. And at the same time, that block is bigger than ever before. We're talking about 4.8 billion people on social media. Suddenly, it doesn't matter if you got racists in your neighborhood, if you want to deal with diversity. You can get that funding from anywhere. You can get that support from anywhere. This changes it entirely when it comes to how we feel when people aren't talking for us. Whether you're Black, brown, white, Cajun, Creole, gay, straight, it doesn't matter. Your experience, there are other people out there who are having that experience. And before, the reason that you didn't get to see that experience is because there was one dude who was focused on his experience, or there was somebody else who was focused on their experience. We're fighting representation. You look at where we're headed and how we communicate with each other. And the fact that you got a camera on your phone and a microphone and you can hit record, that changes it. Because 10 years ago, you couldn't get a 4K camera like that. 15 years ago, people weren't just turning on, hitting record. Things have changed and we're more connected, and that leads to more friction. That leads to more divisive moments where we're like, whoa, you just said something I don't agree with. What the hell is wrong with you? But if we sit down and shut up and realize that we have heard more conversations that are one-sided than we've ever thought about. And before, that was the only side. But now we get to see multiple sides. We get to understand that people aren't always right and people aren't always perfect. We also get to understand that we as a collective are a we. And I think that that is one of the most powerful things that we have today. And so if we can free our feed and use that to talk about the issues in our community that won't get talked about on the news, to talk about the issues that won't get brought up at City Hall, to talk about the issues in our schools, to talk about how kids are feeling, to talk about mental health, to talk about economic issues, to talk about homelessness. You can talk about that. You can talk about the joys and the pains of being an entrepreneur, of being a podcast producer, and you will find people who resonate with that. And through that awareness, if you remember that you got to do shit in the real world, you can make real change. If you say, yo, we're not just going to do this online, meet up in person. We're going to make something happen here. Then suddenly the world's different. Yeah. Are we giving up personal data? Absolutely. We've been doing it for over 30 years. Time. So why not make it an equal exchange? If these guys don't care what you talk about, then talk about the things that you care about. Because they want you to engage on the platform, and you're designed to engage on the platform, and you're going to engage on the platform. Don't try to find away from it, because you're going to end up being a hermit.
Right.
You're going to end up being cut out of everything. So what you can do is say, okay, TikTok doesn't really care what I talk about. So I'm going to talk about what matters to me. And I'm going to be patient, because I know if I keep talking about this, I'm going to find the people. And once I get my people, then I can do something. We've never had it like this before. We've never had a chance against people like Purdue Pharma, Novartis, with Ozempic. We've never had a chance against these guys. We never had a chance against the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, or against the two-party system. We've never had a chance against the fact that Procter & Gamble makes up 80% of your grocery stores, or Unilever. We've never had a chance against Nike using child labor.
Yeah, God.
Right? We've never had a chance. We never had a chance. We couldn't demand transparency reports because we didn't have enough people to make a petition. But now, you bring up what they did, you tell the truth. Just like them rappers would talk about what was actually happening in their neighborhoods, and it got so concerning that it ended up going before the actual Supreme Court. Because it was a concern that people were telling the truth. Now hip hop is the #1 genre in the world.
Oh yeah.
Right? Rap is running everything. It's now expanded to basketball, to politics. We've got basketball players building schools because they couldn't find proper, equitable education in their communities. That's not the way we used to do things. That's me saying, I'm gonna handle this because it's my community. It's my block. And I'm gonna stand on it. And if you rock with me, you're gonna stand with it too. And that's what it's all about. So the book breaks that down. It says, yo, here's the game. Yo, here's how they did it. And by the way, here are 38 actual step-by-step practices that you can take into your community, on or off, right? And say, online or not, and say, this is what we need to do to make this difference. Here's how we fight people injecting fake chaos into our communities to make us freak out. Here's how we fight fragmentation in our communities. Here's how we fight people making up confusing narratives so we don't know which way is up. Here's how we handle that. So the book is everything for me. It's my way of saying, if I had an hour with every single person on this planet to go, dog, you have so much power to do things that you've never thought about before. All you got to do is grab the mic and talk your shit. And let's see what happens. And so, yeah, that's where it is.
So I love all of it. And there's something that I just thought about. So before we went live, I said my autocorrect keeps changing your name from Evante, and I didn't tell you what it changed it to.
What did it change it to?
Evangelist.
Ha!
it keeps changing it from Evante to Evangelist.
That's funny.
So it's kind of interesting that word was being autocorrected, because in a way you are evangelizing a message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, for me, I can say I don't have an angle with the book. I wasn't expecting any revenue from the book. I just want people to have it.
Yeah.
And I want to get this stuff out there. So with it, with the book, you have those 38 practices, but also there's a website as well called freeyourfeed.com. And that website is going to include resources that are free to download. So like, for example, this will be going up tomorrow, but there's a cybersecurity workshop. And it's like, here's how you never done a cybersecurity workshop. You can host this in your community. And what you get on the website is a kit that you can download for free that gives you step-by-step instructions, the deck, everything you need to talk about, so that if you've never done a cybersecurity workshop before, you can.
Yeah.
You can have that conversation. You want to do a press release? You don't know how to write a press release? I got you. There's an example in the book. You don't know what PSAs are? I got you. I wrote it in the book. Because these are everything that I learned how to use when I was here in Lafayette. This is how we did stuff when we didn't have money. to get our message out.
Right. There's not a whole lot of that flying around at the moment.
Right. And so it's like, okay, we were doing this.
Yeah.
So let's do it again. Your voice matters more than ever before. Look at how people feel about this election.
Mm-hmm.
They're not happy with the system where it is.
That's an understatement. That's an understatement.
It's an understatement. And for the first time, we don't have to go, well, what can we do about it?
You're right.
For the first time, we have a way to actually demand systemic change over time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's tomorrow.
Right. Because, government,
It's slow.
Whether it's being brought to a light or not, it's slow.
The reason that we celebrate Christmas as big in America as we do is because of the Hallmark Company. Christmas was a pretty moderate religious holiday for Christians before, but the Hallmark Company got involved in making Christmas cards.
Oh boy. This would be a whole nother episode.
So you see what I'm saying? Like,
exactly.
We now
follow the money.
We have the space. Follow the game.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I got.
Well, love it, dude. I'm so glad you were able to come in, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be hitting up festival this weekend.
Yes, I will. If you see me at festival, I have 3 copies of the book that I'm giving out for free.
Nice.
So if you see me, I'll have my shades on. I have my glasses right now, but you see me with my shades on, come by. I may have a copy of the book for you. I'm doing a book signing at Barnes & Noble on Sunday.
Nice. In Lafayette?
In Lafayette.
Right.
So come through because I'll be talking again about a lot of this kind of stuff.
Where can people get the book?
They can get the book anywhere the books are available. We're working to get it in local bookstores. I ask that you request it if you want it. But you can get it online at Amazon. You can get it on Barnes & Noble. You can get it from me directly on my website. It's called Power, Beats, and Rhymes, Reclaiming Our Cultural Voice. And it's as affordable as I can make it. The ebook is a little bit more affordable, but you can get in those places, and we're working to make it accessible through your libraries and other places, but that takes time. However, if you want it in those places, start requesting it. It's accessible for them to be able to get it in those stores as well.
Dude, awesome. Got a couple of comments. So Andrew A says, this is great, by the way. It shows you what you want to see, not what you need to see, that he's talking about social media. Mm-hmm. And then, all right, no, it shows you what you want to see. Yeah. Talking about, and then Will, Will, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. I know you're an avid follower and a friend of Evan. Will Thiel, maybe?
Feely.
Yep, there you go. Yep. He says, hey, Evan.
Hey.
And then Andrew A says, can we buy the book in person anywhere? So in person, what bookstores locally? Are there any locally here, or is it?
I will have copies available Sunday at Barnes & Noble.
Got it.
Right now, that's the place where it's available, but I'm working with our local bookstores as well to make it more available.
Awesome.
It just came out on April 10th, so we're
There you
still
go.
in the pretty early phase.
Still early.
Yeah, but that's what it's all. That's where it is right now. But like I said, if you see me in festival, I'll have a couple of copies on me. I'm more than happy to talk about it, and we'll like to see as many people out there Sunday. I only have a few copies, but I'd love for it to be sold out Sunday.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, that is it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know it got a little passionate, and look, you guys can't tell on camera, but Evan was trembling, and I could see it. I'm like, dude, if this guy had something in front of him that he wanted to punch, it would be over. It would be over. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to just sit and listen, because you had something that you were delivering, and I think it's great. Obviously, you kept it in a way where it can be interpreted for someone's personal life. So whether that be white, black, mm-hmm. Asian, Southern, Northern, doesn't matter. You can place that, mm-hmm. but obviously it's heavily on the hip hop side, and I love that because you're right. The number one genre is hip hop, and that's where a lot of the influence is especially in America, mostly in America, yeah. But worldly, really. Yeah. You mentioned Cardi B. I mean, like her or not,
right?
It's hard to not hear her on the radio and hear and see her. Like,
yeah,
she's getting people to talk about her. But like you said, social media, you can use it. They take your data, but also you have the ability to say pretty much anything you want.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't like cause a riot or whatever that
Yeah,
looks
with
like.
inside of some parameters, but
Yeah,
through
yeah.
that you're able to make a lot of change in your community.
Love it, man. Evan, it was great to have you on. I hope it went as well as I think it did for you.
I love coming on your podcast, Ben. Thank you for having me again. I'm so excited we got to do this.
Yeah, man. Again, thank you for coming on, and hopefully you have a great festival. There's going to be a lot of good aromas.
Yes, there will. I'll be out there with everybody else too.
Yeah.
But have a great festival, and thank you so much.
All right, Evan, you have a great weekend, and I look forward to seeing what you do continuing in the future, because obviously you're still progressing,
Yes,
and that's amazing.
Still learning.
All right, have a good one.
You too.